109 players. 206 men and 103 women are here for the 2023 FIDE World Cup. It's the premier knockout tournament in over-the-board chess. All of these players have one goal: to become a candidate for the World Championship. Only 3 players in each tournament will earn this distinction. The winners will also earn a combined 160 grand in US dollars. Not bad. Still, Carlsen is the favorite in pretty much any tournament he plays.
And Magnus Carlsen seals the deal with a draw. He makes it to the finals of the FIDE World Cup for the first time ever. 18-year-old Praggnanandhaa advances to the finals to fight against Magnus Carlsen for the FIDE World Cup.
What a final that's going to be.
This is the 2023 FIDE World Cup.
Ladies and gentlemen, a momentous day is in front of us. We welcome you to the final day of the 2023 FIDE World Cup from Baku, Azerbaijan. A look there at the playing hall and the big ticking clock, which tells you everything you need to know. In exactly 8 minutes and 30 seconds, Magnus Carlsen and Praggnanandhaa will contest the rapid and potentially blitz tiebreaks, which will determine the sole winner of the 2023 FIDE World Cup. It has been an event lasting over a month. It has been a grueling event, an epic event in which hundreds of players tried to reach the coveted title of World Cup winner, but only one shall remain when today is complete. I'm your host, Grandmaster Daniel Naroditsky, and once again, alongside Grandmaster Peter Leko. Peter, these 8 minutes, I can't wait for them to pass because this is going to be something else.
Hello Daniel, hello everyone. Yes, this is gonna be the day. It's unbelievable what we have witnessed throughout the World Cup. I feel like it's just building up, and today we're gonna witness this sensational rapid tiebreak between these two extraordinary gentlemen.
You truly cannot script this any better in any film studio. Obviously, yesterday was a disappointing day to some. Magnus Carlsen, he hasn't been feeling well. He's been struggling with the after effects of food poisoning. And with the white pieces yesterday, forcing a bailout, playing the 4 knights variation, forcing an endgame, and making a draw in under 2 hours. But the silver lining is that we will, in fact, get a rapid tiebreaker today. And no matter how many draws they start by making, eventually a winner will be determined. It might take a bunch of blitz games, but we will see a winner at the end of the day. The format is pretty simple. They begin with a set of 2 rapid games, the time control, 25 minutes with 10-second increment per move. If this mini match ends in a 1-1 tie, either 2 draws or 1 victory for each side, they move on to the second tiebreak set. The time control moves down to 10 minutes per side with, once again, a 10-second increment per move. If this second tiebreak mini match ends in a draw, we get to the blitz portion of the tiebreaks. The time control moves down to 5+3. And if that third set is also tied, they move on to the sudden death portion. And we have had in the Svane Wang Hao match already, as well as other matches, I think, a sudden death game. They play as many blitz games as required until a decisive result is reached with a time control of 3 minutes and 2 seconds per move. But we will cross that bridge if we get there. First and foremost, we have our first rapid set, 25 minutes with a 10-second increment. And Peter, both Pragg as well as Magnus Carlsen have had their feet held to the fire when it comes to forcing them to perform extremely well in the rapid portion.
Yes, this is the ultimate challenge with all this changing time control, 25 minutes, first of all, jumping from the classical portion to 25 minutes, then eventually jumping to 10 minutes plus 10 seconds segment, which will be a completely different battle, much more speed at hand, and then potentially the blitz. Insane action. I'm really hoping that we're gonna have a very long and exciting tiebreak. That's what we are hoping for. Both of these players have shown incredible nerves how they are handling these difficult situations, and this is gonna be an epic battle between these two.
There's incredible narratives that surround both of these players. Obviously, for Magnus Carlsen, he has never won a World Cup. This is the one feather in his cap that he has coveted for so long. Someone has knocked him out, whether it was Garakovsky in the early World Cup runs or Jan Krzysztof Duda in the previous World Cup. He has never won this tournament. And for Magnus Carlsen, this means so much. For Praggnanandhaa, the Indian phenom who has burst onto the Super Grandmaster scene, crossing 2,700 for the first time in this tournament and reaching all the way to the stars. His live rating at 27.25. The poise, the maturity, the professionalism, the resilience, the all-around amazing play that Pragg has shown has delighted his fans, of course, in his beautiful hometown of Chennai, his family, and all of the hundreds of thousands of fans across the world who are watching this new crop of Indian talents take the chess world by storm. Who will prevail? Well, that remains to be seen. And Peter, we should not forget that there is also a third place tiebreaker going on. And we should congratulate Fabiano Caruana for an amazing performance yesterday as he forces that tiebreaker with an on-demand victory over Nijat Abbasov.
Yeah, that was a great comeback yesterday. A very important thing for Fabi. I'm super happy for him that he's able to show why we are such a big fan of Fabiano Caruana, brilliant player. He bounced back, and there also we're gonna see a very big battle. However, clearly our main attention, main focus will be on the final match between Praggnanandhaa and Magnus Carlsen.
Absolutely. We squarely on this matchup, the eyes of hundreds of thousands across the world will be on the highest rated chess player in history, the longtime world champion, and the Indian talent who turned 18 during this tournament. The nerves cannot be overstated, Peter. Really, it's hard to make an exaggeration because this is the final day. This is when everything comes to a head. I mean, what is going on through the players' minds right now as we have 3 minutes before the start of the round?
A lot, definitely a lot goes through around their heads. First of all, they have to get ready for quite a lot of portions. Yeah, it's not just preparing for one game. Also, you have to kind of sense that if I'm not happy with the outcome of the very first section and the match continues to the next section, the 10 minutes rapid, then do I have a chance to jump to some other opening, some different direction? Do I have some opening surprises ready for a faster time control? There are so many questions. I completely believe that you can't go into this tiebreak thinking like I'm going to do exactly the same in the 25-minute section, then in the 10-minute section, and also in the blitz. You have to adjust your playing style.
That's a great point, Peter. And those thoughts were going through my mind as I was considering the match strategy that Pragg and Carlsen are going to adopt. And this match strategy is going to take inspiration from all of the rapid tiebreaks that they have already played. For Praggnanandhaa, he defeated Hikaru Nakamura in their first rapid play game. He defeated his compatriot Arjun Erigaisi in a nail-biter, where he had to win several games on demand across several time controls. How important, Peter, is it that these players have already won several matches in the tiebreak portion? Does it help them build up the confidence that they need to perform at this highest level?
Exactly. This is the key, the confidence. It's clear that Magnus Carlsen has tremendous confidence. He has basically won every single tiebreak he had been into all his life, being maybe the exception against Dingley once in the Sinquefield Cup. But yes, that's only one from, I don't know, a bunch, at least 20. So yes, Magnus definitely has this feeling. On the other hand, their rapid encounter is 7 wins for Magnus and 3 wins for Praggnanandhaa. And I believe that here the narrative of talking about that 3 wins for Pragg, that's very, very important. He knows exactly that I have already beaten Magnus. I can do that. This will give tremendous confidence for Pragg.
We see the handshake there in our third place matchup. Fabiano Caruana will have the black pieces against Nijat Abbasov in their first rapid game. Praggnanandhaa has already sat down at the board. Carlsen has been in the habit of arriving with only a couple of seconds left. He will have to be on time because the time control is reduced, and indeed he is on time. Carlsen will have black, sits down with his customary 2 bottles of water, and Pragg, as he has done so many times, starting by carefully adjusting every one of his pieces. With the white pieces in game 1, Pragg will have to put some pressure on Magnus Carlsen and set a strong tone.
Yeah, setting a tone is very important. Then automatically your opponent will also feel that I have to do something with my white pieces as well. The handshake is there.
Let's
And
go. Or not. There we go.
e4. And now it is Magnus's turn to shadow his pieces.
That was 3 bottles of water. My counting skills not up to par this early in the morning. And Carlsen responds, much like yesterday's game with colors reversed with e5. And something tells me that Prague will not be essaying the 4 knights defense in this game.
It will be the Italian. I'm pretty sure that Prague was for the Italian. Exactly, bishop c4 on the board.
Knight f6. And, of course, the fried liver with knight g5 has fallen out of fashion. Prague going main line with d3.
Yes, and now a4 immediately, okay. This is a slight surprise. Usually white plays c3 or short castle first. And the main point is, I believe, pretty clear. Try to surprise your opponent as quickly as possible. Magnus is now pausing. Definitely he hasn't expected the move a4 to happen so early.
And a4 has been essentially the sine qua non of how top GMs have played the Italian recently. This move appears in almost every Italian game, but it usually appears much later, Peter. I think this is what you're saying. It usually appears after white has played c3 and often developed the knight from b1. So a4 as early as move 5, it's not unheard of. What is the idea, other than the pure surprise value, of delaying the move c3? Is Magnus responding in very conventional fashion there with d6? Is Prague going to put a knight on c3 potentially? Somehow, I'm skeptical about that.
Yes, I think that the whole point was of a4 to try to provoke black of deciding already of going a6 or a5. However, Magnus's choice is what I'm also preferring, simply to stay flexible, not show your cards yet. And after d6 short castle, yeah, Prague says, yes, I'm not interested yet on advancing my a pawn. It was just a slight teaser, and I'm kind of asking you, yes, please decide where you want to put that a pawn as quickly as possible.
And we've seen so much new life breathed into the Italian, which is one of the oldest, if not the oldest opening in modern chess. It has been played regularly at the top level since the 1600s. But in the old days, both sides would automatically castle kingside. In the old days, white would play c3 followed by d4. But recently, we've seen a crop of games where black tries to go h6 and g5 and actually delays castling kingside, instead going for the quick attack on white's kingside. But often, Peter, that attack is a lot stronger when white already has a pawn on h3, because that pawn acts as a hook for black's g-pawn once it reaches g4. In this particular version, h6 followed by g5 just doesn't seem to be congruent with what Magnus wants out of this game, which I think is a solid setup with the black pieces.
For sure. Yes, the question is, on the other hand, that what is his move? Does he spend the tempo on h6, making sure that white won't be jumping bishop g5? That's one question. Another question, that if, and Magnus goes a5, yeah, I wanted to highlight that if he is not pushing his a pawn, he goes for castles, then he has to be confronted with bishop g5. So Magnus decides to stay flexible, and after a5, Prague immediately blitzes out the move bishop c1 to e3. That was his idea against black's a5 setup.
That's a big move. Of course, the bishop could come out to g5. Instead, it comes out to e3, offering an exchange. This is a very thematic exchange in the Italian. If black trades, what does white get in return? Well, the downside is clear. White gets the doubled pawns. But in return, white gets pressure down the f-file. The rook on f1 is going to be very happy, combining with the bishop on c4. And in some situations, of course, the knight from f3 could jump either to g5, but more commonly from h4, it seeks a nice post on f5. Black, of course, can do the same thing. Black can respond with bishop e6, but white is under no obligation to exchange the bishops in the same manner, and white can play the move knight b1 to d2, keeping the tension. We actually might see all of these moves on the board. Carlsen has exchanged, but instead of bishop e6, he has castled kingside right into the teeth of white's potential attack.
It's somewhat surprising for me. Yeah, Magnus. So let's just go slowly. Magnus captures on e3, f takes e3 castles. I wanted to give a kind of explanation that maybe the reason why Prague has not played the standard c2 c3 is that he might want to develop his knight to c3. However, he goes for the conventional knight b2. Magnus blitzes out the typical knight maneuver, rerouting that knight to g6. That's the perfect square for Black's knight. Also making sure that all the ideas with knight h4 won't be so dangerous. And Black is also setting up some c6, d5 ideas, trying to block that bishop on c4. Now the big question, however, if you know that Magnus wants to play knight g6, stopping knight h4, then there is the question, why aren't we able to do that immediately?
So knight h4 in this position, jump on the opportunity train, because once the knight reaches g6, I mean, you could play queen e1 followed by knight h4, but it won't come with the same effect. If you play knight h4 here, what I like about that move is knight g6, of course, can be met with knight to f5. And obviously the knight on f5 can be chopped off. Black can play bishop takes f5. But that's a pretty big concession. You're giving away your light squared bishop, which means that white's control over the a2, g8 diagonal is now uncontested and can only be contested by the c65 idea. So without the bishop, Black often struggles to maintain the same level of control in the center. I think that knight h4 might be Prague's most testing response. I'm with you.
Yes, somehow also it fits perfectly to White's previous play. He has already doubled his pawns with the clear idea of trying to grab the initiative with knight h4. He knows exactly that give Black a couple of moves, knight g6, c6, d5, and Black will be the one fighting for the center and also for the upper hand. Then White's pawn structure will suddenly tell. White has to be energetic and knight h4 on the board.
And Magnus immediately responding with c7, c6, the idea that we have talked about here at length, preparing d5, in some situations preparing to deploy the queen to b6 and attacking that e3 pawn, which could become vulnerable later on in the middle game. And of course, Carlsen keeping his knight on e7 in order to take the sting out of knight f5. Knight f5 in this position would lead to a very unfavorable exchange for white, because it would relinquish white's control over the center and allow Black to push d5 and establish ideal control over the center. White's attack, in the meantime, White's fledgling attack, would go absolutely nowhere with that pawn on f5 blocking White's control over the f5. This is out of the question.
Yes, one thing that, however, we have to address the typical exchange sacrifice. Rook takes f6, and Magnus is kind of provoking it. That gives me the feeling that clearly he anticipates the move. He feels like in this exact position I don't have to fear it. But since Prague is now pausing, I believe we should be talking about this exchange sacrifice. Rook takes f6, g takes f6, queen h5. Usually this is the way. Black plays the move d5, white falls back with the bishop to b3, and long terms there is very serious idea with rook f1 going after Black's king. But Prague has felt like, no, Magnus is trying to provoke me for it. Probably white is not yet ready, and he plays according to the demands of the position. He goes for queen e1 instead.
And rook takes f6 has to be kept in mind as long as Black's knight remains on e7. And it likely will remain on e7 for the time being. This is the whole crux of Magnus's strategy. If you rush the move knight g6, we've already been down that rabbit hole. White plays knight f5 and achieves the kind of ideal setup on the king side. Prague is aiming directly for g3. Once the queen reaches g3, rook takes f6 will be a direct threat. Black's king could slide over to h8, but Prague is not trying to do anything fast. He is accumulating his pieces on the king side. That is the first phase of any attack. You need to actually get your pieces to the right area of the board. Nothing in the Italian happens within 2 or 3 moves. This is a gradual process. And a big question, Peter, is whether and when Magnus will push d5, because the drawback of the move d5 is obvious. It weakens the e5 pawn, and queen g3 potentially will come with even greater effect.
Yes, queen e1 is a very nice little touch. I also somehow remember that in this type of positions, often the little quiet move h2, h3, seemingly doing nothing, giving a tempo, is also a very typical way of reinforcing the idea of going queen g3. In certain situations, it's kind of nice to control the g4 square. But for the moment, it is Magnus who has to think about how to handle the position. I'm loving the choice of Prague for the fact that Magnus has tremendous experience in the Italian in different structures, but exactly this very specific one that White has kept the pawn on c2, and White was able to go for a very quick knight h4 followed by queen e1, queen g3. Feel like this is a very fresh position.
Prague has done a monumental job this tournament of sensing in which type of position his opponent will feel most comfortable, most uncomfortable. And when you're talking about players like Hikaru Nakamura and Magnus Carlsen, that is very, very hard to do. Against Hikaru, he responded to the move 1c4 with a principled e5. Against Magnus, in their first classical game, Praggnanandhaa played the English opening himself, and he did manage to put serious pressure on Magnus Carlsen's choice of setup. Now he decides to opt for e4, and an opening that he himself is more comfortable with and more experienced with, which makes a lot of sense because in the rapid time control, one of the most important things is not only objective advantage, but also to get a position that you feel comfortable with.